Hey there again, folks. It's Chris here from modernprofessional.com, and we are steaming ahead with our content marketing strategy series for lawyers in particular. If you happen to be an accountant and you're listening, then hello. And to anyone else who's not a lawyer, hello to you too. You are most welcome, but I am focused on lawyers because that's what I do. So, we have so far in our content marketing strategy looked at creating a business case for content marketing. And then we have looked at really refining and defining our audience to ensure that our content is going to be targeted to that audience, because targeted content is ultimately more useful to the recipient than generic content. And I'm sure you've experienced this yourself. Today, we are going to get into what most people start with, but not you because you're doing it properly, which is what to actually produce. Now, at the end of the day, the decision is going to come down to one of four things. It's really pretty straightforward. There is words, images, audio, and video. Those are the four content options. And then, of course, you need to decide where to put it. In terms of what to produce, this is often the hardest question, and there are two or three really core ways of looking at it, which is, first and foremost, what does your audience prefer? Now, you might not have a good feel on this necessarily, and so you might want to go everywhere just in case. That's actually the strategy I use. I use go everywhere, and I'm going to explain why in a future episode. But for now, think about this. What does your audience most prefer? A lot of people still prefer to read rather than watch video. Now, with that, a lot of people like to podcast because they can multitask. They can podcast and listen to the audio while they're driving or while they're on the bus. Video requires a little bit more attention, and so people don't always like to consume video. So the question is, what does your audience actually prefer? That's a good starting point, because at the end of the day, we've gone to the trouble of defining our audience. Now we use that information to our advantage. What does your audience prefer? At the very least, your audience's preference must participate in this process. It must be present in this process. It doesn't mean that's necessarily the only thing you're going to do, but it must be there, because if you have identified that your audience are avid video watchers, if you're in the media space, say, and your audience are on YouTube all day, every day, watching other people's media, and you just ignore that opportunity, then that's just stupid. I mean, why would you bother defining your audience in the first place if you're going to ignore their needs entirely? So, what type of content does your audience like? The next question, of course, is what are you strong in? Or what can you become strong in? I don't want to fill you with fear here, but producing videos is actually slightly more difficult than writing an article because it's more confronting. You have to actually be able to speak the same as you would if you were producing a podcast. And so if you have a tendency to turn to jelly when faced with a camera or an audience or the opportunity to say more than a couple of words in a row, then you might want to stick to writing if you are strong in writing. However, I want to caveat that with this statement, which is, you do get better. The first few videos I did were terrible. I was wooden, I wasn't very natural, I didn't really plan what I was going to say in the right way. I had a good framework, but I didn't plan it correctly for my particular talking style. And so over time I've become more relaxed. Hopefully now I look fairly natural at least. I still occasionally have moments where things don't come out as I expected, but by and large, I am now more accustomed to speaking to camera than I was before. The first few podcasts I did were incredibly awkward and strange. I still don't like the sound of my own voice. I still don't like seeing myself on video that much, but I've become used to it. I've become better at it. I am not the best at it, but I'm not the worst at it. I've become better. And so just because you're not strong in something now, I would encourage you just to give it a go for a little while, even if you record videos that no one watches, and see if you can hit the level of comfort where you are prepared to start publishing things. Give it a go. The absolute worst case scenario for anyone who's doing this properly is that you will be mildly embarrassed and produce something that's fairly boring. And perhaps you will get a comment that says, wow, that was boring. And if that's the worst thing that happens to us in our lives, then I think we're all doing pretty well. So I would encourage you to give it a go anyway if it's something in particular that you think your audience is going to resonate with. Now, the third piece of this equation is, what can you produce consistently? You need to be able to actually produce something consistently. And so if you decide that you want to go down the video path, you need to have a way in which you can incorporate video consistently into your message. Otherwise, it's going to be falling back on this random acts of content problem that I've spoken about before. If you produce one video now and another in 7 months, that's not really a consistent part of your content marketing strategy. You need to be able to consistently deliver. There is one thing that by and large every single book, video, course, comment, article on content marketing talks about. It is consistently delivering valuable content to your audience. And so if you pick something, you need to also come up with a strategy to do that thing consistently. Otherwise, you're going to really struggle to deliver that value. So let me ask you this question. If you look at your audience, do you know what kind of content they consume? If you don't, I would encourage you to start with video. Because from video, you can turn it into audio, and from audio, you can turn it into an article, and from an article, you can turn it into quotes and images. And then you have a nice broad cross-section of things that you can do that are going to spread your content out, that are going to repurpose your content across multiple platforms so you can get there a wider dispersal of your content. If you're looking to build your brand or build awareness of what you do and how you do it and what you'll like, then that's a good way of doing it too. The other reason I do encourage people to take a video first approach is because on the scale of trust, video has a higher trust factor, and so you may get less views on your video. But if people can see you, if you're relatively natural, if people can see you and hear you at the same time, then they get a much better sense for who you actually are and what you're actually like. Similarly, in audio, it is a more personal experience listening to someone speak for a certain number of minutes than it is reading an article written by that person. And of course, you compare audio to written. Written is the least personal medium to engage with. We might find it the most comfortable thing to produce, but that's just because we're used to it usually. But it's also the least personal. The only real way you can distinguish most lawyers' content from most other lawyers' content is that it's got a line saying who it was written by. If you were to remove that, the chances that anyone could identify your work as opposed to someone else's are extremely slim. Now that comes back to how to produce meaningful and authentic content, which I'm going to come back to as part of our discussions here. But for now, consider taking a video first approach to your content production. So let's just have a little bit of a look at how that's going to work. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to come up with a topic. I'm going to come back to topic generation in a future lesson. So for the moment, let's have a look at, you've come up with a topic. It's a good topic. You've got a headline. You know roughly what you want to say. Now you can go two ways here. If you're more naturally able to write something down, then why not write an article and then produce a video after the article, essentially based on the article's content. There is no harm in duplication. You don't necessarily want to read it from a script like this, but once you have written the article, have a very good idea of what you might otherwise say. You might have subheadings that you can then rely upon to keep yourself guided and targeted about what you were going to do. That's essentially what many people can do if they're less comfortable speaking straight to camera, because it gives you a guide about how you're going to go about accomplishing it. The next thing you want to do after you're going to have your video is to get a transcript of the video. From the transcript, you're going to have someone, it can be you, it can be some poor schmuck that you delegate to, you're going to have someone produce an article from it. And you're going to insert headings, you're going to change the language. Often in video, we repeat ourselves more than is appropriate in an article. And so you want to refine it. You want to turn it into a nice, valuable, consumable piece of work. You can also take the audio from your video and turn it into a podcast or an audio piece of content. And that way you've taken one piece of content and so far you've turned it into 3: video, audio, article. From your article, you can use any number of free tools to get some quotes. Get some quotes, put them on relevant images, and then put them on Instagram, put them on Facebook, put them on Twitter, put them on LinkedIn. Take your work and ensure that the value is being delivered across the board. What are the most useful quotes? Now, quotes offer less value to people, of course, than a full-length article, but quotes also have a tendency to be able to spread your brand awareness. If you say something valuable that can be summarized in a few words, put it on a nice image, and then get that out. You might decide to link to your original article when you do it. The other thing you can do, of course, with your video, if you're making a 5 to 10 minute video, let's say, the chances are pretty good that you are going to have some 30 to 59 second snippets that you can take out of that video, and you can put them onto other platforms. These are like quote cards, but they're moving. Okay, so 30 to 59 seconds, why is that? It's because of Instagram. Instagram has a 59-second limit on videos you can upload, but there's no reason you can't make a separate series in your YouTube channel. Short snippets, put them on YouTube, put them on Facebook, upload them natively to Facebook as well, put them on Instagram, put them on Twitter. These shorter form pieces of content. And if you're really sharp and able to develop your content strategy well, and you're getting used to speaking to video, what you might start doing is designing what you're going to say in your video so that you have a couple of those each video. If you can come up with quotable quotes beforehand, and then you can simply capture those very easily, you don't need to hunt them down because you planned them in advance, then you will be able to do that much more easily than having to rewatch your video 10 times to find something useful. Similarly, in transposing your verbal work into your written work, it becomes an art form to be able to produce a video that more readily translates to a written article than otherwise might be the case. You get used to producing video in that way, and it reduces the time commitment. And for lawyers, I think this is really the most important thing, which is this strategy allows you to produce a lot of good, valuable, meaningful content across different platforms in different ways that are likely to be attractive to different sections of your audience, all from one piece of content. And if you have a team working under you, perhaps your only way of actually engaging is you do the video, and then it's someone else's responsibility to break it up into other things. And so you're able to leverage your time in that way, you're able to utilize your junior staff in that way, and you're able to consistently produce content with an appropriate level of oversight from you. And so this is a good way of producing a lot of content very quickly, shared across a variety of platforms in a way that's respectful of your time and the value of your time. I said at the start, when I was talking about the business case and the return on investment for any form of content marketing, you needed to look at the cost of production. And if you are fortunate enough to have a team, then you also need to leverage that team and lower the cost of production of your content marketing so that it increases your return on investment. So that is what I would produce. That is how I would go about deciding what to produce and where to put it. We're going to talk about where to put it a little bit more in the next episode, but for now, let me know. How are you going to produce content that's valuable to your audience? If you're having trouble finding content that's valuable to your audience, let me know. Shoot me a note. I'll help you out. But for now, that's the end of this one, and I'll see you soon.